Hello, my name is Mark Lang. I'm the wildlife biologist with Texas Parks and Wildlife, Colorado and Austin County. And today I'm going to cover a couple sample management plans as well as the annual reporting forms. And so the idea of this is to present a scenario and then go through page by page through the wildlife management plan to show you how we would complete the plan for that specific scenario. So scenario one, we have a 185 acre tract, Colorado County, that is predominantly brush with some open pastures, and the main interest of these landowners is deer and turkey for hunting by family and friends only, and they have a large population of feral hogs. So just to start, on the first page of the management plan, you're going to have a lot of the really basic information about you, the property, and so you can just complete that to the best of your ability. And then on the bottom section here, you're going to see where you want to select your target interest. So for these landowners, their target interest, like I said, is deer and turkey, as well as an interest in songbirds. So we'll incorporate all of that into the management plan as we work through it. Okay, on the next page, you're going to see the section for your goals and objectives that was covered earlier in the presentations on completing that. And then we have the list of the 7 major practices here. And so we've selected for this specific property, habitat control, predator control, census work, as well as supplemental food and supplemental shelter. Like we mentioned in the description of the property, hunting will be part of the management plan, and that's going to be conducted by family and friends only. As far as the harvest information and the deer population, you can get that from your local biologist, or you can fill in the harvest info yourself. But the rest of the information you could get from your local biologist in terms of sex ratios, target production, etc., etc. So moving along, here we have, are you a member of a wildlife management association? And this property is. They are not in a wildlife property association. So now we're getting into section 1, which is habitat control. And like I mentioned in the description of the property, it was predominantly brush. So for the habitat control section, we're going to do some brush management. They're going to use a mulcher to conduct that. And so you can see that checked off here. So brush management done mechanically with a mulcher. And it's also at 10 acres or 10%, whichever smaller. So for this property being over 100 acres, they're going to do 10 acres annually and just rotate that around the property. So you can see on this next page that we don't have anything checked off. And that's okay. We don't necessarily have to fill in everything on the plan. We want to be pretty precise and specific as to what our goals are and how we're going to achieve those. So leaving some of these sections blank is perfectly fine. And we don't want to be redundant in any of the practices and list them multiple times. So just pick where they fit you and your property the best and your management plan and incorporate that into the plan from there. All right, so the next page, you can see under erosion control, we don't have anything listed. Then we get into predator management. So under predator management, this property, like I said, has an abundant population of feral hogs. So we have feral hogs checked off here. They're going to be conducting that predator control with trapping and shooting. So you can see those 2 checked off here. And that's going to be the second practice included in this plan. All right, next page, we have providing supplemental water. We don't have anything checked off here. We got plenty of water on the property. Water is not a limiting resource, so nothing incorporated on the plan here. Then we get into supplemental feeding. In this section, we don't have anything planned for that, so we can also leave that blank. But here under supplemental feeding, we are going to go ahead and feed protein under a gravity-fed free choice feeder for supplementation and harvest of wildlife. Minimum here is 1 for every 320 acres. So this property is a little over 120 acres. So we just need 1 feeder, and they're going to keep that full year round for supplementation for whitetails. So that's your supplemental feeding category there. Moving down into supplemental shelter. This property is not going to conduct any of the practices listed there. So we can move on to the next page. We're going to go ahead and do some half cutting of trees and shrubs to a minimum of 10 acres annually. So we're going to go ahead and incorporate that in there for supplemental shelter. And now moving along to the last category, we get down into census work. And since this property is going to be actively hunted, they are a member of the co-op. They're going to be doing their wildlife herd composition counts, as well as collecting harvest data. So you can see how those are listed here. So daylight deer herd and wildlife composition counts for deer and turkey, just keeping records on those, doing counts morning and evening when deer are most active, and turkeys, and just keeping an active log of what you see on the property. And then we're going to report the number of deer harvested, as well as age, weight, sex, and antler data, and harvest date from those animals. So we'll include that on the plan there. And now we'll move along and do example 2. 25-acre tract in Colorado County with even ratios of mixed brush and open pasture. Main interest is songbirds for bird watching, but the landowner has an interest in reptiles and amphibians. Property has some drainage and erosion issues, so the landowner wants to build a pond to help with those issues and for kids to fish out of. So you can see this is a different scenario here, smaller acreage, different interest. So we'll go through another plan here to show you, how the plan would be completed to meet this scenario. So again, you have your basic information up front. You can fill all that out on your own, and then down here, again, for this property, interest is going to be reptiles, amphibians, as well as songbirds. So we'll include that there. Again, the goals and objectives was covered earlier, so do your best to fill that in. And then the practices conducted for this scenario are going to be the habitat control, erosion control, as well as supplemental food and supplemental shelter. Hunting is not going to be a part of the management plan on this property, so we just check no there, and we can leave the rest of that category blank. Okay, so for this property, they are not a member of the Wildlife Management Association and not a member of a Wildlife Property Association, so we leave those blank. Moving on down, we get under habitat control. Again, this property is going to do some brush work to open up some of the brush to maybe have more access for their songbirds. So we're going to use hand cutting for this one, as well as a brush hog or a shredder and a mosaic pattern. So that's for the brush design. And again, we go back and look at 2.5 acres, so it's 10% or 10 acres, whichever is smaller. So for this property, 2.5 acre minimum annually to qualify for that brush management practice. Okay, so for erosion control, this property, like I said, has some drainage issues, so we're going to attack that with some pond construction. So we're going to put in a 1 acre pond to try to help catch some of that runoff. And the implementation under this plan would be summer 2020, but we could bump that up. So just whatever year you plan to do that, where it falls into your plan for the future. So no other erosion control practices, so we'll leave all that blank. No plans for any predator control under this section here, so we'll move on to the next page. And we're looking at now supplemental feeding again. And so here we're going to be targeting songbirds. So we have supplementation, feeders, gravity fed, and for this acreage we're going to shoot for about a dozen of those that we're going to keep, with food in them year round. So that'll get you the supplemental feeding category there. Moving on down to supplemental shelters, we want to target eastern bluebirds. So we have nest boxes, again about a dozen of those to be included for this acreage. So that's pretty much it on the plans on how they would fit those scenarios and how you could complete them to meet the minimum of 3, preferably with an extra practice or 2 just for insurance purposes. But another big part of this process, and the management plan as well as the reporting, is going to be just good record keeping. We always push people to really put some effort into making a good map that's easy for the appraisal district to interpret. And so here's an example of that, where this may fit that first property we talked about, and they're going to do some brush management in that upper right corner in 2020, and then we're going to do some brush management in another area in 2021. We got our feral hog trap there in the center of the property that we're going to keep active. And here's our protein feeder down here for the whitetails. And so this is just a good map where the appraisal district can look at it. They could show up to the property and go to these locations and should be easily, see that the practices are being conducted. So it just makes it easier for them when they have a good map to look at, and they can go find, that you are conducting the practices you agreed to do. So again, just part of the record keeping is just good receipts or copies of receipts, written records, and before and after pictures. So as they look at this map that you would include with your reporting, is they can also pull up the before and after pictures. They can see what it was like before. They may be standing on site with you at the time, and they can see what you've done after, and that just makes it easy for them to validate that the practices have been conducted. So just a good record keeping. If that's, keeping a log of your feral hog trap, what days it was open, and how many hogs were captured throughout the years, then that can be, good proof that you're keeping it active. The protein feeder, again, receipts for protein, receipts for buying the feeder itself, and that's just good documentation that the practices have been conducted year round like agreed to. So the annual reports, the appraisal district will send those to you when those need to be reported or returned to them. And it's just to fill in the blank check mark form, a lot like the management plan there, and just include what you've done over the last calendar year, depending on your county and how often you need to report. But basically, if it's every 3 years, then just keep an annual log of what you've done for each year. And again, the appraisal district will contact you when they need that, and just submit all the documentation back to the appraisal district before the deadline of your county. And again, just good copies of everything, of receipts or written logs or whatever you got, just to incorporate with that form, so there's no question you've done what you've agreed to do. So the appraisal district may inspect the property to verify practices, so they will do audits. Again, they're just going to want to see that you've conducted the minimum of 3 practices at the appropriate intensities. And from what I've heard from landowners, once they see that and they're comfortable with it, they're out the door. So they just want to see that you are doing what you agreed to do. But if you're not, it could lead to the loss of your wildlife valuation, and potentially even some back taxes on the property. And when you look at the numbers, won't get into these, but you can read them on the screen, but it is a substantial reduction in your taxes. So we don't want to get into going back and paying back taxes. It gets expensive. We just don't want to go there. So, do the practices like you've agreed to do. If you ever have any questions on if you're doing them right or at the appropriate intensities, then you could, contact your biologist and get some input there, and just maintain good communication with your appraisal district so that there's no potential of error there. So, and with that, I think we're pretty much done with this section, and we will roll into some questions. Thank you.